Hi there. Welcome to the latest episode 108. This is your host, Dr. Jenny Chen. In today's episode, our guest, Dr. Stephen Ryan, co-founder and chief medical officer of PolyUnity, shares how his startup is transforming healthcare with 3D printing. How a crisis turned into opportunities long after the pandemic, and how this hospital-focused 3D printing platform is saving costs and improving lives by innovating in-hospital additive manufacturing. Enjoy.
Please listen to the disclaimer at the end of this podcast.
Hello. Good morning. Dr. Ryan, good to have you on the pod today. Very quick intro. Dr. Stephen Ryan is the co-founder and chief medical officer for PolyUnity, an incredible startup in Canada. And Stephen, why don't you tell us what is PolyUnity?
This is a very long story, Jenny, but I will give you the short version. We are a company that has focused on lowering the barrier of entry to all hospitals in Canada to adopt 3D printing technologies effectively. So we're trying to democratize access, build software that is easy to use, has all of the regulatory compliances and things that you need to consider to actually deploy real end use 3D printable parts into your hospital setting. And that's our mission. If I want to do the very short version, at the end of the day, we want to teleport medical equipment.
Yes. I would say that's a very high level explanation what PolyUnity is. And I think one is your journey from physician to entrepreneur is quite commendable. I really aspire to that myself. And I also believe we have met during the pandemic or maybe at the beginning of the pandemic. So the story of PolyUnity itself, the journey of the company is also kind of parallel to your own personal journey. So if you can just walk us through that journey, it will be wonderful to understand obviously who you are, but also how this company came about and what actually it does, in reality.
Certainly. And you are right. We bounced off each other, I believe, during the pandemic and then shortly afterwards when we started to get a little more traction and presence in the Canadian marketplace. I think we touched base really, really early days, but that's now, believe it or not, almost 6 years ago. So we have a lot to catch up about. So the origin story is interesting, and it has ultimately kind of changed the whole trajectory of my life. But it goes like this. When I was in medical school, I was told I had to do a research project, and I didn't really want to do anybody else's research project. I wanted to get creative and make something that was impactful and meaningful to me. And I really got interested in the technology space within healthcare and medicine. And that was back in 2014. So if you remember, one of the coolest stories of the time was NASA 3D printing a part on the International Space Station. So I see this and light bulbs go off and I go, that's teleporting, right? They had nothing and then they asked for something and then sent an email and boom, you have a part up in space to fix a problem. When I was doing rotations through rural Newfoundland and Labrador, I would go out to different remote and rural hospitals. And things looked different, right? Like the equipment was older and let's just say replacement parts weren't maybe readily available or new equipment wasn't readily available. And what I think I was observing at the time was supply chain, right? And I didn't know that term, but I just knew things looked different. And this was just the end of the supply chain. So the moment of realization was if NASA can do this in space, why can't we do it out? Like just to the periphery, out to these remote sites. And I think that's where the genesis of this whole thing came from, was just getting obsessed over the concept of sending medical equipment to where it had to go at the point of consumption, right? I'll fast forward a little bit now, which was that took root as a research project in the university, but ultimately we spun it out then into what PolyUnity is today. And the timing was very interesting because when we did that, within a calendar year, the pandemic happened. So we had built a small functional print farm, had some concepts of how we wanted to approach this and build our startup. But we had a real-time, real-world use case fall in our laps, which was we had to weaponize this manufacturing unit that we had built to live respond to needs of our province. And then all of the pieces started coming together. You needed a manufacturing site. You needed software to manage the whole thing. How do people place orders? How do people validate the part? How do they pay for the part? And this is where all the complexities and nuances of the platform we've built now came from. So we did an amazing job of responding to the needs of our province back in the pandemic, and really set the stage for us to be able to then push across Canada and replicate that style of project over and over and over again until now we're fulfilling orders and parts off of using additive manufacturing technology all the way from St. John's, Newfoundland on the East Coast to BC on the West Coast. And so that's the longer
That's
version
a
of the story.
fantastic summary. You know, for people, okay, I agree. The supply chain term, I had no idea what that was until the pandemic. Then everybody's talking about supply chain. And it seems like the problem that you're trying to solve, though, was even before. It existed before the pandemic. It kind of exacerbated during the pandemic.
I say it shined a really ugly flashlight on things that were already wrong, right? That's what the pandemic did. Yeah.
So want to just define the problem, because when you were in those rural town that you were rotating through, what equipment were missing? Because I'm, why can't you just Amazon it?
Mm-hmm. Well, this brings into question a bigger issue, which is that of procurement, right? And you can't just buy things off of Amazon and put it into hospitals. This is where like vendorship and suppliers and vetted organizations and trusted vendors, all of these concepts are in place on purpose to kind of, have a safety net around medical equipment. And we had to learn this the hard way, but you can't just print something and bring it into a hospital. It doesn't work that way. No, very similarly to you can't just order something on Amazon and bring it into a hospital. There's due process that sits underneath all of that makes all of this possible in the first place. So, the very easy examples, I would observe would just be like, cracked plates or assemblies or, just like worn out armrests on cancer treatment beds or like insert thing here. It would just all be patched up. And I'm not trying to say that 3D printing is a catch-all for all of these things, but the low-hanging fruit things that you can start to chip away at and build a strong foundation and base system. Which parts can you make on 3D printing and where should they go and how do they get there? My thesis here is that you start really simple. And if you can build a system that can address the simple things, then you can have a strong foundation to build complexity. And you know where this is going as much as I do. This is going to now turn into pharmaceuticals that are 3D printed and customized to you. This is going to turn into bioprinting. This is going to turn into custom splints and casting. But if you can't do it for the simple, innocuous things in your hospital, like a test tube rack or a wall mount for a hand sanitizer, you're never going to get there with these more complex ones. So that's when I'm talking about democratizing access to things, I'm looking towards the future. And how do we have a system in place inside hospitals that they can consume anything like this down the road? But you need to have it set up first.
But obviously, all these systems that you mentioned, that different verticals it can potentially go to, also poses different challenges down the line for you too, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So, does this started as a movement or projects that's funded by the government, and then eventually evolve into a company? Or how does become now formalized into PolyUnity, which is actually, are you guys venture backed now, or is it still mostly private?
It's very much bootstrapped.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That is amazing.
Believe it or not. And I think that that's a whole other conversation about the appetite for venture capital to get into the medtech space in Canada. It's just very difficult. But that's a whole other kettle of fish. This started as a research project. So it was MunMed 3D. Memorial University was where I did schooling, and my two co-founders and I started that research initiative purely as an educational thing. It was, we knew that 3D printing wasn't universally understood. People didn't know what it could do, what the vision of it was going to be. So you had to almost desensitize an entire market before you commercialized into it. You had to explain what this was, what the potential value to the system was going to be, et cetera. And the easiest way to do that was, it was a government-funded bit of cash we got, deployed a state-of-the-art 3D printing facility, and it serviced our med school. It serviced our local kind of like medical community. But really quickly, then when this pandemic hit and we commercialized, our ecosystem around us understood it. They knew it. It wasn't this new concept anymore. We had been running this thing for a couple of years, so it was already top of mind. They knew what a machine was. They knew what the materials were. They knew what the application types could be. So it wasn't this starting from zero education process when we started to build the company. And I think this is like very evidenced now. We've been around for 8 years. And we've been talking to people inside hospitals every single day. And this went from, you enter a room and you ask, do you know what a 3D printer is? And maybe you get one hand raised, right? And you're like, oh, that's the person I got to go talk to. Now we go into rooms and you say, does anybody know what a 3D printer is? Everybody's hand shoots up. And not just that, they say, oh yeah, my kid has one in the basement, or, oh yeah, I have one in my hospital, or I've seen one down the hall. And I think this just is a cool indicator of ecosystem maturity. But I think the ecosystem is still lagging behind the rigor that it needed in healthcare. So just because you have a machine doesn't mean you can make things, right?
Yeah.
That was a trap that we fell into 8 years ago. We said, oh, we got machines, we can make things. Mm-hmm. But again, then the realization came in that there's bigger systems at play around you. And some of these regulatory pieces of the puzzle, the quality management pieces of the puzzle, all of those things are now the moat. And I think the necessity that brings these machines to life now.
I have to say, even today, if you Google 3D printing, it still shows 3D printing useless gadgets or plastic parts, not something, what you guys are doing. And I think like at the beginning, when you encountered this technology, you were kind of part enthusiast, but also part skeptics as well. How did you transform yourself and eventually become a fanatic, I would say?
I remember the first time I saw a video of a 3D printer on a YouTube video, and this is well before actually kicking off the whole MunMed 3D thing. I was absolutely taken by it then. I just couldn't quite wrap my head around the ability to have a little machine in the corner of a room that can make things for you. It just broke the concept of manufacturing or going to Walmart to buy something. Just having something there that can make things for you. It's like a paper printer. Like years ago,
right,
you would have to go to a library or you would have to go somewhere to get something printed on a piece of paper. And now they're in every single household, right? And I could just see a future where, if the price points came down on these things, the materials improved, the applications started showing up, these would be household items. And it is starting to go there. And I don't think I ever had a chasm to cross on, did I believe in it or did I think it was going to be impactful to the world? I was hook, line, and sinker day one. And it changed my whole life. I knew when I started medicine that I was going to end up here one way or the other, but I'm stubborn. So I finished medical school. I finished my residency. I practiced for 5 years and kind of ran this off, the side of the desk with a great leadership team. But, push comes to shove and you have to think about, what do I want to do for the next 40 years? And what do I want my legacy to be? And what gets me up in the morning and what inspires me? And seeing this thing growing without me here full time was starting to really grate on my mind. So yeah,
I know,
a year ago,
you were part-time the whole time. I
the
can't
whole
believe
time.
it.
I know. And a year ago, I just had to rip the Band-Aid. A bit of an identity crisis. You kind of have to configure who you are then, because you introduced me as Dr. Ryan at the beginning of this thing. And I don't know if I call myself that anymore. It's now I'm the founder of PolyUnity. Like that's my title.
What should I call you, Dr. Stefan? Make it less formal?
Sure.
Because people call me Dr. Jenny all the time. And I'm fine with that. It's like Dr. Phil.
Right. There you go. We'll call it Dr. Steve for now. Yeah.
So, okay, so you were doing this fantastic project in the moment of crisis that was very needed and people see the value. What happens after that crisis is over? Like, did you feel the wave of enthusiasm kind of become muted?
Boom.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And then what happened?
Oh my, this company shouldn't exist. it really has gone through 8 moments of existential crisis, which is like the first one being immediately post-pandemic, where you do this unbelievable thing. You respond to a moment. You produce products on site, on demand, in a province that has no manufacturing capacity to make these things. And then, but the reason it happened was because for a flash in the pan, red tape got cut, right? Like it was a moment where the cuffs came off and we were able to do things that traditionally in these systems you can't. But what we observed, Jenny, right on the heels of that was the red tape came back in a big way. The pendulum just swung. And as much infrastructure and capacity that we built up, and there was other manufacturing units that were spun up in our area of the world too, just went back to original suppliers with original contracts, and all of the progress that we had made. Not only did it get like absolutely decimated, if anything, we went backwards because people then started to ask questions, and they were valid. What is the part? What is it made of? Where does it go? Did infection prevention and control sign off on this? Did biomed sign off on this? Which budget does this come out of? All of these system level things that we didn't have to think about during the pandemic suddenly showed up. Mm-hmm. And that could have been a moment in time where we said, well, this is too complicated. Like I'm walking away from this. But we looked at it as an opportunity to learn the system. So the more walls we hit, the more ability to build into our software things that just got a part through. And now when we show up to a hospital and we get asked these questions, we say, yeah, we got a system for that. We have a system for that. We have a system for that. And then everyone goes, oh, okay, you've thought of it all. Well, I guess we can proceed. It's interesting, but I think you hit the nail on the head, which is post-pandemic could have been a death of a company moment, but I think it was also the opportunity that allowed us to learn and grow and persist.
So you had to interact with a lot of hospital administrators and their own engineers and procurement departments. What is the problem what is the difference between thinking that, first of all, resulted in the problem of lacking equipment in a certain way, and to how are you different in terms of thinking of these problems? I mean, does it make a difference whether or not you're a doctor?
I think just from the vision aspect of the company and our ability to communicate what we do to certain clinicians, like clinical level people, like beyond the spare parts and things now, like we are into the custom scan to print casting world or the splinting world, and we do a bolus service for cancer care. So it's these clinical settings that I think where I particularly fall into the mix is I'm like a translator, right? Like you have clinical people with needs and requests and wants, and then somehow that needs to get packaged up and sent to a team of engineers to come up with the solution, design the part, design the thing, and vice versa. Then you have to take that engineering language and pass it through a bit of a filter and relay that back to clinical people or hospital systems. And that's where I think I'm thriving at this point in time, right? I took 20 years in a healthcare system, and now can be a bit of like that clinical and engineering liaison to make sure that the communication is working well and the products that we deliver are what has been requested in the first place. And I think that's really, really cool and a neat way to package up my past into something useful now.
Yeah, maybe not a translator, but a master communicator.
Sure. Yeah. Let's call it that.
Not everybody. I can't talk to a hospital administrator as well as you do, probably.
Well, that's just muscles you have to flex. I couldn't either the first time. you just learn
people
it.
Avoid you in the hallway now because they say that's the 3D printing guy? He's going to talk to us about 3D printing.
Not at all. And I think that's a difference maybe between the Canadian system too, is we're not like salesy, right? Like we're not like a rep running around the hospital. We're part of your team, and we wouldn't be force feeding you something if we didn't think it was going to add value. And we're at a point now where we don't go and hunt. We have a platform that has an ideas intake portal. And when people want us, they find us, they go in, they submit their request with their idea, maybe sketch something on a napkin, say, I can't find this, or I wish I had something like this. And then that's when our team picks it up and starts building it, and ultimately then hosts it inside of our digital inventory tool where other people can access it, right? So yeah, I think that's one of the interesting moments of turning of a tide. When you're in a startup, I think the first, 10 years or 5 years, especially in medtech, can feel like you're just, pounding sand and running against walls. And that one moment when somebody comes to you, and then that is a repeatable thing, that's like, okay, it's catching on. You know what we do. You came to us with the right idea, with the right concept, and know that we can make that with our machines. Brilliant. Like if that means that the education has caught up to the application and the people know what we do, whew, now we're talking, right?
Yeah.
And that's only in the last couple of years has this kind of started to happen.
One thing I really love about working with Pitch 3D, the program that we have with startups, is I am able to interact with startups all over the world. And before meeting you, Steph, I had no idea where Newfoundland Labrador is. Labrador is a breed of dog,
The edge of
as
the
far as
world.
I know.
Yep.
Didn't know it was actually a part of Canada. Also didn't know what Nova Scotia, is that right?
Nova Scotia.
Nova Scotia.
Yeah.
No idea. It sounds so foreign. And so I thought it was like somewhere, in Eastern Europe or something like that. But the different geography does make a lot of difference in how you found a company and how you become entrepreneur. Is very different because of the local environment. You do not have a surplus of rich people to give you money for adventures. Nobody has that sort of spare, and there's no community to support this kind of venture. So how did you guys carry yourself from, mostly government funded and now bootstrapping essentially? And how did you form the team? Let's not miss the team here, because you got a fantastic team around.
So I'll go 1 and 2. So one is
Sure.
is like how we managed to fund this thing. So you're right. Like it's not a massive angel network around us or readily available venture money, but what we do have is a very close knit and self-interested tech community. We're from a place where typically we anchor our existence on things that can go away. Fishing, right? Like a fishery it collapses, then you have no fish. You got to figure something else out. Oil, right? You drill all the oil, that goes away. It's so fleeting, and there's not a lot of a sustainable base for keeping a province like running. And maybe about 15 years ago, the province was really clever and really doubled down on tech because it's untethered to a resource. It's just tethered to ideas and people who can pull off amazing things. And like even in our local tech ecosystem right now in Newfoundland, I think we're on track to have the most unicorns per capita in maybe
Really?
Canada. Yeah.
Wow.
And it's ridiculous. But again, I think it's a side effect of just being small enough that everybody knows everybody. We share war stories about our sales cycles and our pathways through different markets. And there's a lot of support, but also the government side of things gives a lot of funding runways to you. And because we're small, they can afford to do so, right? Like, and we can kind of get a good runway and a good base out of government programs. So that's how we did it for a long time. But then obviously that only goes so far. And then you have to start actually revenue generating. We picked maybe the hardest thing in the world to do, which is try to sell to Canadian public healthcare system, but it's slowly starting to work. But you have sales cycles at procurement times 2 to 3 years from first contact to any money. So now we're at the point where we're starting to stack some of these in a pipeline, and it's starting to kind of decouple right from our revenue baselines, which is really exciting. But it's only now after 8 years where this is starting to happen. So we had to get very creative and be very frugal. If we had unlimited money, I would have the fanciest machines in the world. I would have, 100 people on staff. But I think accidentally, by doing it small and bootstrapped, we actually found the right path forward, because I think you can take a lot of capital and overshoot what the market actually is looking for. And I think that can create a product that is mismatched to the needs of a system. and then you risk it not working and collapsing, and you've just spent, $10 million or something. Where we were able to literally just build a little piece, deploy it with a close client, with a close relationship. That's all we had the time, the resources, and the energy to do. Perfected it. Add the next thing, bring that to the next client. It was so small and iterative and purposeful and strategic that I think at the end of the day, we built something that is robust and didn't take the venture money. Took a little bit of time, but I think we have a product that is matched to the market now, which is really, really cool.
Yeah. I think what you're talking about is capital efficiency.
Sure.
I'm not saying venture-backed startups are not capital efficient, but in certain cycle, you could have a surplus of capital and not generating the kind of result, or like you said, it overshoots the kind of expectation, but it was not well received by the market. So, I mean, it just sounds like a try and error process, though, throughout these 8 years to tinkering and see what works in a very capital efficient way. And how did you find your team to able to suffer with you? Let's just say that along the journey.
That's a great term, actually.
How did you trick them into this?
I didn't trick anybody. It was amazing. I think what happened here again was a pandemic catalyzed moment, which was, I don't know, like, think about the psychology of an event like that. And what happens is you question everything. You're like, the whole world shut down. What am I? What do I want to do next? Because like everything's fleeting, everything's fragile. What do I want to commit to? And just during the turbulence of the pandemic, we just managed to start interacting with local heroes, right? Because they were also solving the manufacturing parts of the puzzle. They were integrated into relief efforts, and we were too. So you're just in this melting pot of really amazing professional people. And we were just lucky enough that two of our current CEO and president, they had just exited a company and were looking for the next thing effectively, and were kind of giving their time to the pandemic relief, and bounced off us and started asking a few more questions, like, what's the vision of this thing? Like, what do you actually want to achieve with this? And I think where it was in healthcare, it had a good social cause. It was challenging. I think they knew this was not going to be easy, but they did a lot of government sales and government procurement cycles before, so knew the game. And ultimately, I think it was just really cool. I think they were like, okay, in the pandemic, we saw you turn on a print farm and produce 100,000 face shields for the province of Newfoundland in sub 3 months. What else can we do? And I think that's all it took, was just like a cool moment in time to see what this could be. Luckily, they had exited, so we're kind of free agents and had experience to know how to take something from a startup to enterprise. And here we are, 4 or 5 years later with this team. And just given their experience, we're able to kind of, nucleate and find the right people for the right job in a startup kind of setting. So now our development team is small, nimble, AI enabled, super, super efficient. Our engineering and design team all operate under quality controls, QMS systems, like really tidy. And then the three of us now are on like the business development side with 2 sales and marketing people. Like that's all of PolyUnity. And I think what we're able to achieve with a really aligned, hyper-focused, passionate group of people, it's just making some magic.
Yeah, it does sound like some magic, and also important, the ups and downs that you guys have to experience and still stick together. That is pretty magical. Now, I always felt like you sat on just tons of ideas because, PolyUnity basically collect ideas and try to convert it into a 3D printable parts or devices. What are some of the best ideas you heard, the most creative ones? And what are some of the worst ideas ever? I want to hear that.
I'll start with the worst. And It's not that they're the worst. It's not that they're the worst because they're bad ideas. It's just that it's a result of a mismatch of expectation of what printing can do, right? So it's like, someone can show up and say, I want, a perfectly engineered, like, stainless steel surgical retractor for this hyper specialized thing. And you're like, yes, it's not a bad idea. It's a great idea, but it's the worst application for like the 3D printing that we're doing. So again, it's just mismatch of perception. And the conversation we have then in that situation, if someone shows up with an idea like that, I never say no. I say not yet, right? It's like, just give the industry a little bit of time to mature. We are printing in metal in the world. Like, this is happening. The tolerance is needed, the quality controls around these things. Like, there's just a little bit of system maturity that needs to happen. So we take this idea and we'll store it away. And I'll just say, listen, we got it flagged as needs metal, needs higher quality, needs more tight Health Canada regulations. But when we, stack our deck a little bit and the machines catch up, listen, like, doctor insert here, we'll get back to you and we can do this. So I don't know if I've heard like awful ideas. It's just, are they feasible and practical and able to be done with this type of manufacturing process? Then the best idea, sometimes the best idea is the simplest thing ever, right? And these are big capital cancellation projects that we would never know about unless like a team offered it up. And what I mean by a capital cancellation is that you had a massive project your hospital was going to have to undertake because of a safety issue or a legacy part failure or something, and you're going to have to replace, $1 million worth of equipment. And you can solve that with one piece of plastic or something, and that might cost you $5,000 to cancel $1 million project. And somebody in the hospital is just thinking about this and said, if only I had that, I don't need to do that. And that's where massive ROI cases start to show up. And like a very, very simple version of this would be like, well, I'll give you two examples. There was a patient safety issue in a hospital here where there was a loop on a psych ward blind system. A loop, you can thread something through, safety issue, right? Because patient protectivity, you get a bed sheet through it, you can read through the lines. Yeah. To replace the entire blind system of this psych ward was projected to be about $750,000. So they just said, we don't know how to fix this, but just can you help? So that was the idea. Intake, need new blind system. Okay. You take a loop and you turn into a peg so nothing can be tied to it or loop through it. An adapter that this like kind of awning retractor thing can go up and interface with it. So you can still crank the blinds up and down. You print 100 of these things, you put them in and replace the loop. They didn't have to replace any of their windows, didn't have to replace any of the blinds, canceled a year-long project that was projected to be about $750,000. So like, wow, simple little idea, massive impact. Yeah. And those are the cool ones that you can start to uncover the longer you're in the space. Yeah.
It is not sexy per se when you put it on the video or whatever, but it's so impactful though. I mean, just imagine the millions of dollars of procurement the hospitals have to spend, and now instead that money can go to the patient care instead. Yeah, that is pretty amazing.
Another interesting one. This is a project we did with Nova Scotia, and they wanted to deploy a new monitoring system for their emerge departments. So they sourced these like telemetry units that would like print, you could see on a small device like heart readings, O2 sats, basic things like this. And their way of implementing it was to put a little probe or like a finger sensor on people in the waiting room at the emerge, and then behind inside the emerge would have these screens that they could monitor maybe riskier patients if they were still out in the waiting room, to see if there's any changes in heart rhythms or rates or anything that they might need to pull them in. So we worked with the OEM on this one and designed a enclosure that would put 4 of these screens into a single unit that could be mounted on a pole system. So instead of having, nice, 15 or 20 of these things all over the place trying to keep track of it, it made it into a uniform screen, top to bottom, all labeled by patient and where they were. And you could just look at the screen, do a fast scan and say, okay, everyone's fine, off do your other duties, or come back and see one is lit up red or showing some kind of change in status that you would have to go respond to. And that was a project then that, because they were rolling this out, needed these units that we built to centralize all of the these screen types and scaled that across most of the emerges in Nova Scotia, right? So like, just little wins like that, they start to stack and can show you exactly what this technology can do when you apply it the right way.
Yeah, these are great examples showing that you guys are kind of the manufacturer brains of hospital systems, which usually it didn't exist. It never existed. Hospital, I mean, hospital still is not acting as manufacturer per se in this case. You guys are, and they also got the design power from you guys as well.
It's like a tool in the toolkit, right?
Yeah.
You're a tool in like the biomeds toolkit.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it seems like you're working with hospitals everywhere now in Canada, from east to west coast. How do you coordinate all the activities? I know you have a digital platform, but what about the manufacturing hubs?
Right now, the majority of manufacturing itself happens in our headquarters. So like we do the majority of the work here. We have one auxiliary site in a hospital in Ottawa that does some low volume on-site production if needed. And right now are in the process of deploying machines into a hospital out in BC. So this will be the beginnings of this distributed manufacturing network from coast to coast. So, and actually there's a few more machines in another province of New Brunswick. So if you think about that, suddenly what happened was you have one centralized production center. We had to do that for a period of time until you could prove out that you could kind of run remote printing. But then New Brunswick quickly came online. Ontario quickly came online, now BC. And what we're going to start to do in the future, Jenny, is, remember, I bring this all the way back to the beginning of our conversation, is we want to teleport. I don't want the hospital to worry about the machines or the materials or the quality systems around it. I want to have all of that managed in the back end of our system, so I can just push a print where it needs to go on site, have, cameras that are monitoring quality, temperature, assessments, maybe having a cross-reference to the actual CAD file for dimension quality. And this would be like a born qualified part. And I think that's where this gets really cool then, because then it's a hands-off thing for your client. Is simply, I need that order, and you walk down the hall and it's there on the machine, right? Like that's the perfect end state of this. But there's a few bridges we have to cross to make all that functional. But I think we have the framework already kind of visualized, and we have the key players across the country now where we can start to bridge this gap of us making things to you making things, or us making things for you, but just on site.
Yeah, I mean, this reminds me of many, many years. This is not a plug. I'm not asking people to buy this book. I wrote a book a long time ago. It's From Ideal to Implementation, talking about creating a 3D printing center in a hospital. It's not just buying a printer. And it's far more expensive than buying a printer. First, the hospital has to allocate labor to just manage the machine and ensure all the quality, all the stuff that you talked about that we wanted to automate. And I've seen companies actually have dedicated engineers on site to manage their own machines, but the hospital still have to create a room that can house the 3D printer and have the vent if there's fumes. So it's very elaborate. What are your remote satellite right now looks like?
The way to do this is no different than how we managed to scale this company in the first place, is keep it as simple as possible, right? Like, if a hospital expresses interest in 3D printing, the first thing I will ask is, what do you want to achieve? Like, what is the purpose, right? If it's, you want to make surgical guides and jigs and you want to do pre-surgical planning, instantly you've jumped 3 classes of machines up into something more complex. If you say, I want to learn how to make a splint for my patient in my OT department, the barrier to entry to that is magnitudes less. If it's a clinical engineering team that just says, I want to make some basic functional FDM style PLA, ABS, TPU kind of parts, no sweat. I'm going to navigate you straight to a Bamboo Labs machine, right? Like it's just the easiest plug and play thing that can make a good output at the other side. As long as you have the system in place around the part, it's perfectly capable for what you want to do. So I think there's a bit of a needs assessment that goes into what the client is looking for and what the hospital wants to achieve. And then you pair it with the i3D, right? Which is what we have, which is the catalog of parts, plus all the quality management system, plus the ordering, the general ledger code integrations, and all of your approval pathways. Suddenly you go from no ecosystem to a good quality machine, which is same as one that we use, which means we can almost guarantee similar quality as long as you follow the instructions, right? So that's where the system comes in and allows you to make a part as well as we can make the part. And if all you want to do is not worry about it and just place an order, that's easy enough too. It centralizes in our system, gets pushed to the machines. We make the thing, and we know where you are, so we just send it to you. Like there's lots of ways around that.
So are you guys mostly focusing on extrusion-based 3D printing at the moment?
I think again, it's you can get so complicated with this in terms of the machine, the material types, and the applications. But this is the sales pitch, and I will do one, is that if you can't figure out how to do this with a simple part, you'll never be able to figure it out for a complicated one. So I always like
That's not
to
a sales pitch. That's really good. I like that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right. But that's where we come in, right? It's that foundational layer, that thing that you just need to have in place so that you can begin to grow an ecosystem inside your hospital. And I just pick off the low hanging fruit, get really, really good at making a test tube rack. Just like place the order, have it come off, inspect it for quality, low risk item. If that breaks, fine, replace it. It's not going to harm a patient. Maybe your sample tips over. That happens anyway, right? So like find an innocuous thing, get really, really good at it, but approach it like you're printing an organ, right? What do I need to have in place? And then if you can figure that out, when it comes time to implement more complex things, if you want to get into patient-specific things, if you want to get into surgical jigs and guides, if you want to get into bioprinting in the future, at least you have the foundational elements that'll let you get there. And that's the big chasm that I think hospitals are yet to cross. Is you can think about the big vision and you can deploy a machine, but I promise you it'll gather dust if you don't have the system behind it.
Yeah, from a humble beginning. But unfortunately, a lot of times when where anyone in the hospital systems think about 3D printing, they immediately jump to 3D printing organ, even though we probably don't even need it.
At this point in time, yeah.
I mean, if you cure diseases, then you don't really need a replacement organ. And it just economically, it's not even feasible, to be honest.
So I kind of skirted your question too. I'll fill in the gap. At this point, like the FDM style printer is that's our like workhorses. That's what we use and that's what we recommend. Very like recently, listening to clients and new unique needs, we purchased a Formlabs 4BL machine.
Yeah, Formlabs is great.
Great machine. And it was purely because it allows us to push a little bit deeper into material type, end use application. It can be autoclaved. It's more durable. There's a couple of unique cases in some biomedical worlds that they just needed the properties that machine could offer. So when you get enough demand for something, we just don't go buy a machine because it's cool looking. We buy it because it's rationalized to buy it by demand signals from the market. And I think what you're going to see coming out of us in the near future is going to be an optimized micro production package, right? And I think that might look something like maybe you need 10 Bamboo Labs machines, all perfectly networked together. Maybe you need 2 Formlabs 4BL machines. Maybe you need 1 insert machine here. And if you have that as a unit, then you'll be able to produce at a minimum everything in the PolyUnity catalog, but also would be able to produce third-party things too. Like if you wanted to host a Spenties or an Active Armor style application, these machines are perfect for that job too. So you're getting better bang for your buck when you think about what type of micro manufacturing site you might want to have in your hospital setting.
One quick technical question that we haven't addressed is not just printing, but actually a lot of time after you print, you have to post-process whatever that you print. How do you solve that problem? Because I feel like that's a more sticky problem than printing itself.
It can be. It's one of the earliest design challenges that I think I gave to my first work term student at MunMed 3D was, I know it could be impossible for some things, but to the best of your ability, design this to come off of a printer functional. And sometimes that is possible. Sometimes it just isn't. But if you set out on a design journey for a part, you understand the physical limitations and the way that something has to be made on a 3D printer, you can get pretty darn close to having it come off functional. And if that's just breaking off one piece of support equipment, cool. But most of the things that we make, ideally, you just take it off the print bed
Don't need
and it's good to go.
post-process.
Yeah.
The funny
But
thing
again,
is, yeah,
that's maybe 10%. There's just no getting around it.
the funny thing is that there are a lot of innovations, believe it or not, in 3D printing, the new 3D printing process, and you see new kind of printer comes out, regularly. But post-processing technology is actually quite lacking in terms of innovation. It's just something that I found during my research.
I think you're right. And it's almost the more laborious part of it. Like if you think of trying to automate production on machines like this, one of the Achilles heels of it is that there is a bit of manual labor needed. So they're just cycling parts. And I'm sure you've seen automated print farms now where the plate lifts off and the part gets pushed off and the print can restart. I think those kind of solutions are getting better. But you're absolutely right. Until we have like robotic systems or something in place that are going to allow you to do lights out manufacturing, where it's able to pull a print, pull supports, do a rinse in isopropyl alcohol, put it in a cure station, do the quality assessment until it gets there. There's always a human in the loop or a couple, and that's a dependency then on your production. Yeah,
I'm actually going to have coffee with a dental 3D printing company soon, and they claim they can do all these steps actually automatically.
Cool.
I'll let you know. I'll keep you posted on that. So let's talk about scale, because that's where you guys are right now. How far have you penetrated the Canadian market, and how far? Because it seems like you guys pretty much are everywhere. How far can you do in Canada? Can you grow?
Oh, I think having presence in a hospital doesn't represent the capture, because what we do has applicability to every department. So you almost have to think about it like, sure, there's only like, X amount of provinces in Canada. You get 12 contracts. Is that game over?
Yeah.
No. There's, inside of a province is X amount of hospitals. Inside of those hospitals are X amount of departments. And where we do have applicability to every single department in some way, we pride ourselves in designing a solution everywhere from a janitor all the way up to a surgeon or whatever. And I think what happens is we land and expand. So right now we have a few key wedges, one being clinical engineering. You land there, or you do a few high ROI jobs for them. They love it. You implement a little bit more, you get sticky. Then the lab services department shows up to Biomed and they say, how'd you make that thing? Oh, we work at PolyUnity. Boom. Lab services shows up. Can you make me a lab rack that does this? Can you design something that does that? Then you've kind of ballooned in another department. Then OT catches wind that you've made something for lab services, and they go, can you make scan to print like splints and casts? Oh yeah, absolutely. Blubble. Then you get OT inside the bubble. So I think these are like some of our core wedges would be lab services, cancer care, clinical engineering, facilities, and OT. And we've kind of sporadically captured one of these departments in all these provinces, but not all of them in all of these provinces. So we have our work cut out for us, where we just have to take the footprint that we have already and the traction we have with this department and then scale it up so that it's a full kind of enterprise level thing for that hospital to consume and use. So lots of room to grow yet. We're doing this in like small digestible projects with very targeted departments across the country, but we have all the rest of the departments in each of these hospitals that we're playing with to get inside the umbrella of i3D.
Just curious, how many projects do you have right now in front of you that you need to figure out?
Address? One of the coolest ones is it is out in BC, and like I said, this is going to be the first version of, at least in my mind, is the teleporting medical equipment. So we're outfitting an occupational therapy department with a printer, all the resources they would need to pull this off, which is a scanner and all the filament, all the materials, the workflows, software package, and it'll look like this. They scan a limb, comes to us, we process the file, we send it back through our software, and they put it on the machine and print it. So at the end of the day, I want that to be more seamless and have the machine just light up the second we push it to the machine, and it'll fabricate. But that's one that's on the horizon that's really exciting, because I think that's a nice package. That's something that if we pull off well, we can take that to any OT team now across the country that we haven't already interacted with and say, hey, do you want this as a cool package or an app, right? In our app store will be this scan to print process. So that's one big one. And all the rest of these ones, the projects are done. We've done commercialization projects, pilots, these kind of things. We're not calling them those anymore. Anything we do now is early client engagement, early client interactions. The system's proven, it works. We know it does. We have the data. We've crossed that bridge from pilot project, and now we're a company that's on a push. I think all of the interactions we have now that are new, it's just figuring out what the needs assessment is, what they want, and how to deploy it. And that's just our bread and butter at this point in time. Everybody else that we have under contract or as a client, this is just a constant re-engagement. And that's one of the most important things about I think doing business in healthcare is the trust thing. So we don't set you up and forget about you. There is constant effort in client success and follow up and new feature development for you, and make sure it gets easier and better and faster and stronger, so that like we keep you there and keep you engaged, and you can see the benefits of the system and the technology.
I'm really, I would just say, envious of your position to be able to constantly engage with these different hospital systems and solve their problems. I can see why, there will be a moment of identity crisis to try to transition from physician to entrepreneur, because I do believe in a way that you're making a much bigger impact. You're affecting much more on a larger scale of people's lives that they didn't even know about. There's not going to be a thank you after that fixed line.
Absolutely. But not from some people, but then others will. Like I like that interaction with that facilities and clinical engineering team. When we delivered that product to them, it was like a collective sigh of relief. They were like, "Oh my goodness, thank you so much! Like this will save us so much problem and cost and headache down the road." So you get thanks from the right people, but I don't know. It's more of a philosophical question about identity crisis and ending up in a position like this. And if I really reflect back on it, Jenny, it's like you imagine what medicine is going to be like when you're striving to get into it. And then sometimes, like anything in life, like it's just not what you thought it was going to be. And I don't know what I thought it was going to be, but it just, I felt like I was built for something a bit different. Medicine adjacent, but still in healthcare. And I don't know, I think I just found my home now. Like relative to me a year ago, I'm a much happier camper. And I do feel like what I'm doing is impacting the healthcare system. I love being able to be that bridge between clinics and engineering. I've learned new skill sets that I never would have before if I was just in a general family medicine clinic for the rest of my life. And I don't know, I could eat my words, if all this falls apart and I'm off trying to find another thing to do or whatever. But I think you got to follow your gut sometimes too. And even from the day I started medicine, I knew I was going to end up here one way or the other.
Yeah, that's very sincere and very well said.
Yeah.
I am torn actually between my own work with 3D Hills and my clinical job all the time. Is which should I dedicate more time to? And I hope that we can have another conversation maybe down the line, have another podcast, talk about all the medical applications. Could be a good follow-up episode to talk about when you're there, and maybe even expanding into different verticals of applications.
Laterals. Yeah. Absolutely.
And we are reaching the end of this hour. I hope this hour could be longer, but unfortunately we are reaching the end. Do you have any closing remarks for the next physician founder? As a future generation of Stefan.
I think if you're juggling your clinic life with a startup, you're going to be faced with a decision point at some time. And I think if you've already started a business or a startup, I think you've already made up your mind is that that's what you would like to do. But it's ripping that Band-Aid off, transitioning and reconfiguring what you are or who you are is a really hard thing to do. You got to be darn sure that that's what you want to do, But the best thing I've ever done is just pick, because my brain was being torn in two directions at all times. And I, in retrospect now, know that I was doing both of these things in a very half-baked way. Yeah. I could have been a much better clinician. Not better, I just mean I could be doing more, getting more involved in, sustaining the system, or, getting deeper into clinical family medicine, become an academic. I could do more there. But I was also then at the expense of doing more there, not being engaged enough with the company that I started. And I have a responsibility to that too. There's people employed here. I have an executive team that needs help. I have a skill set that would benefit the company if I just had more time. So I think my words of advice would be, don't be afraid to start that startup. But if you do, you better be ready for that moment where you have to choose.
That's very well said. And something for me too, I think. Well, Stephen, this is a really good conversation. I really enjoyed our hour together. Hope to invite you back. But thank you so much for today's episode. And I'll talk to you next time.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
This podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. The views expressed do not constitute medical or financial advice. The technologies and procedures discussed may not be commercially available or suitable for every case. Always consult with a licensed professional.